The Occultist and the essence transfer system that she enables is one of Diablo 4's most important systems for itemization and builds. This system is single-handedly the solution for a whole host of problems that plague ARPGs, from balance centered around player trade, item drop design, build diversity, and legendary item design. And yeah, that's a bold claim, but I think that this single vendor, this single NPC, will fundamentally transform Diablo because it improves the core fundamentals of itemization. The Occultist is critical to the design behind Diablo 4's itemization, and I think it's important for us to talk about how it works and the problems that it solves. Now, standard disclaimer here that Diablo 4 isn't even in beta yet, and all the details that we know so far could rapidly change. So here's how the Occultist works. Step 1. You kill a monster, and you get lucky, and you find a legendary item, the rarest tier of loot in the game. Step 2. You decide that the legendary item you found isn't worth equipping directly on your character because you have some other item with better stats or something. Step 3. You take it to the Occultist, and you extract the essence. That destroys the legendary item in the process, by the way. Step 4. You talk to the Occultist again to imbue the legendary power to any other legendary item that you have, consuming the essence in the process. This system enables you as a player to increase your character's power or push towards a certain build when legendary items drop. You can extract the legendary essence and put it on a more powerful base item, for example, so you're not stuck with the lower stats of the legendary item that it dropped on. Or maybe you're really pushing to make a particular build, like let's say you want to make a Blizzard-based sorceress build, then you could stack many different legendary powers on different slots that all increase or modify the powers of Blizzard in some way. Or maybe later on you find an absolutely godly weapon, but it doesn't have the legendary power that you need. Then you could extract the essence of your current weapon and apply it to the new weapon that you just found. So, okay, that sounds cool and all, but let's back up a second and talk about the diagram. The core mechanic of every ARPG is this simple equation. Kill monster, get randomized loot, gain power. Now, while this equation is simple, that also makes it surprisingly easy for game developers to mess it up. For example, let's pretend we were developing an ARPG and we made the disastrous mistake of balancing the entire game and item drop rates around trading. If we do that, then the best way now to gain power is no longer killing monsters or getting randomized loot, but instead to sit on a website or a trade window, hitting refresh until we get the item that we want. This is precisely what happened at Diablo 3 launch, where the real money auction house dominated the game once you reached Inferno difficulty. Or let's take a different scenario and say that we totally eliminated trade so players always find their own loot. Problem solved, right? Well, as a result, we now force players to filter through hundreds or thousands of useless items before finding something that's even worth the 1 second it takes to click on the item, to pick it up, to check it to see if it's worth looking at. In fact, this situation is currently the prevailing game design of the most popular ARPGs on the market right now, and it's so bad that you need a complex and complicated loot filter setup so that you don't even see the items drop because there's simply so much trash. Now, in my opinion, if you need a highly specialized and tuned loot filter to properly play the game, then that's simply bad game design. How the heck are normal players supposed to know what to do? ARPGs should be able to be learned and understood just by playing them. For example, in Diablo 3, when a legendary item drops, there's an orange beam of light. This is telling you something important, that this item, this orange beam of light item, is extremely valuable and rare, and that you should pay attention. But unfortunately, in today's ARPGs, whether you're playing Diablo 3 or Path of Exile, the rarest tier of loot is usually something that you throw in the trash. So why is the game giving me a signal, a giant beam of light in the middle of the screen, if the item that is dropped is fairly worthless? If these items are so important but they're trash, how do we get the right ones into the hands of players? Unfortunately, I think currently the answer most ARPGs have for this is to massively increase drop rates and add loot filters to the game. Now, I'm not inherently against loot filters, but they become a problem when the entire game is balanced around them. The problem it introduces is that it makes the game impenetrable to new players. It becomes impossible for your typical player to just pick up an item, equip it, and eventually make a good build with the stuff that they find. And when I say a good build, I don't mean a best-in-slot build. There will always be a best-in-slot, highly theory-crafted build out there. What I mean is just something that performs decently okay without necessarily needing to watch a 3-hour YouTube video that's harder to understand than an introduction to college-level organic chemistry. What we ultimately need here is that the value of a legendary item, the value of that orange beam of light, to be much higher. And there's a way to fix this by making legendary items more valuable. I think we can do this in 3 easy steps. So step 1, remove power from skill trees and put those skill modifiers on legendary items. Right now in ARPGs, skills and skill trees are just too powerful. We see this problem in Diablo 3, where every skill has 5 runes, where in most cases there's an obvious and most powerful rune choice, making the other choices worthless and an unnecessary constraint on the power of other skills. We also see this in Path of Exile or in Last Epoch, where some choices on the skill tree multiply the damage that you deal with a certain skill or damage type by double or triple. In some cases, most of these powerful nodes on these skill trees could be entirely removed and turned into legendary powers all on their own. Step 2. Allow the legendary item power to be extracted from one item and imbued on a different item. When you find a legendary item, but it conflicts with an item that has good stats that you already have, equipped, it makes that legendary item that you found somewhat useless. The joy of discovering a very rare item is suddenly turned into a chore of filtering out mountains of vendor trash. There should be a way to change the legendary power of your existing item, so you don't have to choose between your existing item stats or the new legendary power. Oh, and also not brick the item that you're imbuing that legendary power on in the process. Step 3. Remove most player trade options from the game. Now, I know this is a controversial opinion, and we could do a whole video about how player-enabled trade breaks ARPGs, but for certain, if you do allow player trade, there will be an army of bots who will attempt to ruin the entire game by dominating the trade market. You can see the impact of this having on some modern games like Lost Ark, and it's not pretty. The botting and trading transformed the game from a fun experience based around the diagram to feeding the market as efficiently as possible. If you don't remove trade, then players are more or less forced to interact with the market to improve their character at any reasonable pace. The Diablo 4 Occultist enables all 3 of these steps to function. It drastically shifts the balance of the game back towards legendary items and away from overpowered skill trees or player and bot-driven powered economies. And it makes builds much more interesting because you can mix and match legendary powers in ways that you never could before. You're also not limited to a single slot for a legendary power, giving the player much more flexibility and agency when they're putting together their own build. I think that the way the Occultist and the Essence transfer system works really enables players to put together more good builds themselves instead of always needing to rely on an external build guide from a content creator. And ultimately, this system means that when that orange beam of light shines, that it'll shine much brighter in your heart. There's still much we don't know about legendary items. In fact, the last time that we got any reasonable update about itemization in Diablo 4 was in December 2020. Unique items were also something that we learned about back then, and maybe some of these will serve as baseline items for certain builds, where you'll organize your legendary powers around a particular skill or set of skills. Still, there's far too much that we don't understand about itemization right now in Diablo 4. But when we do, I'll be doing a deep dive on builds and itemization for every single class in the game. So make sure that you're subscribed for that. One of the coolest parts of the Occultist's design is that it enables the developers to more easily update the game with new legendary items every season and balance them accordingly. Because players can move legendary powers at the Occultist from item to item, game developers don't necessarily have to worry about completely table flipping the game's meta and balance every time they add something new to the game. And instead, new legendary powers can more easily meld into existing builds. When players can simply shuffle legendary powers around from slot to slot, there's also not as much upheaval when a legendary power is nerfed or even removed from the game. In other words, this system makes builds less about a single build-defining item and more about how the combination of legendary powers all sort of work together to make one cohesive build. Now, why do I speak with so much confidence about this system? Well, it's because Diablo Immortal's Alpha had a very similar system, and it worked incredibly well. Of course, we all know that in the released version of Diablo Immortal that your build is just your credit card, but in the Alpha, this system added a tremendous amount of depth and flexibility to builds and gave you real options when considering your game activity, whether for group or solo play. And what was most impressive about this system is that it allowed a wide range of diverse builds that performed reasonably well, even if you were playing off meta. I think that Diablo 4's itemization and builds will benefit tremendously from the Occultist because of the flexibility it offers players and the game developers alike. That means less digging through trash items to find something good, and an easier way for all players to enjoy builds of their own creation. Anyway, that's it for this one. Tell me, what class are you planning on playing in Diablo 4? Do you already have any build ideas? Let me know down in the comments. Anyway, peace!